I regret that kiss so much now my husband doesn't want to touch me anymore. He tells me I am. Hello, Reddit. I've been a long-time lurker on this app, but I've never posted anything until now. If someone had told me 3 months ago that this would be my life, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have called them a liar. But now, I'm faced with the reality that I've ruined my home and marriage. I'm tired of the way things are between me and my husband, and I desperately want things to go back to how they were before. I want my husband to forgive me and move on, and for things to be just as they were. I'm hoping that by posting here, I'll get some insight and advice on what to do. Any advice you guys can provide me with will be honestly appreciated. What did I do, you might be wondering? Well, I kissed someone else on a night out with my friends, and my husband found out about it. Ever since then, he has not touched me. Here's some backstory. My name is Taylor, and I am a 25-year-old woman. I've been with my husband Eric, who is a 24-year-old man, for about 2 years now. It was a whirlwind romance. We met at a friend's birthday party about 3 years ago, and we were instantly smitten with each other. We exchanged contacts and decided to keep in touch. We went on our first date 2 days after we met at the party, and then in a few weeks we were dating. A few months later, I had moved in with Eric the moment my lease expired. Eric was from a well-to-do family, while I came from a family so poor there were times we had to rely on food stamps. So things were a lot easier for him than they were for me. Barely a year after dating, we got married. Eric's parents paid for the wedding on the basis that I signed a prenup. I didn't mind. I loved Eric, and I agreed. The parents, of course, went with their promise and sponsored the wedding, and it was absolutely perfect. Eric's love language is giving and acts of service, so he loves gifting me stuff, from expensive jewelry to the warmest handmade or thoughtful gifts. Eric really gives it all. He also loves acts of service, like I said earlier, and will give me a massage when he sees that I'm stressed or tired. He will cook and even took on about 90% of the house chores because he loves doing them. Despite that, he pulls in 100% of the income in our household. I've said earlier that Eric is from a wealthy family, so the moment he graduated, his family set him up really well in life. Why am I telling you all this? Just so you understand the perspective and how much freedom I had. Everything was done by Eric, and he did everything willingly, and we both enjoyed it. I'm also telling you this so you understand how much of a mistake I made. So all in all, our marriage was really good. Our sex life was really active. We made sure to go on date nights every Friday, just before the start of the weekend. We didn't have any kids yet, but we definitely wanted some. Our marriage wasn't just a storybook romance. It was real life, messy and beautiful. Eric and I were like two puzzle pieces that just fit together perfectly. We had our share of ups and downs, but we always found our way back to each other, stronger than before. What I loved most about our relationship was how we supported each other. Eric was always there to lift me up, to encourage me to chase my dreams. And I did the same for him, being his rock when things got tough. We had big plans for the future, like starting a family and growing old together. But then, I messed up. I made a mistake that is threatening to tear us apart. And now I'm left wondering if our love is strong enough to survive this. Eric and I were like two sides of a coin, each with our own unique traits that somehow blended perfectly together. Eric was the quiet one, the introvert who found peace in the stillness of our home. He was content with a small circle of friends and found comfort in their familiar company. I, on the other hand, was the social butterfly, always buzzing with energy and seeking out new connections. I thrived on human interaction and loved the lively chatter of gatherings and the warmth of friendship. Despite our differences, our relationship flourished. Eric's calm demeanor balanced out my outgoing nature, and my enthusiasm brought a spark of excitement to his life. That didn't always mean that things were always good between us. Eric didn't like most of my friends, especially the new ones, and he sometimes didn't like it when I went out, especially without him. I wouldn't call him controlling because he wasn't, and I now realize that he had a valid reason for not liking my friends. Eric isn't a social butterfly, like I've said before, so a lot of times I had to go out without him, which he didn't like most times because he liked being near me. 3 weeks back, we went to Eric's sister's wedding. It was not in town, but at a beautiful destination. The whole event was just stunning. I was one of the bridesmaids because Eric's sister and I are really close. The place where the wedding took place was absolutely breathtaking. It had such lovely views and a peaceful vibe that made everything feel magical. The ceremony itself was full of love and happiness, and you could really see how much the couple adored each other. Being part of the wedding was such a special experience. It made me think about love and family, and being there reminded me of the love I shared with Eric, and how important it is to cherish it. The wedding was really nice, like I said before. Everything went smoothly, and it was just beautiful. We had a lot of fun celebrating with Eric's sister and her new husband. When we got back to town about 2 days later, some of our friends invited us out for a night out. Eric and I don't share a lot of the same friends, but we have a few mutual ones who invited us to join them for a few drinks. Eric was feeling pretty tired from all the socializing at the wedding, so he decided to stay home and recharge. He told me I could go if I wanted to, so I decided to go out with our friends without him. He was cool with that and just asked me to text him if I needed a ride home. Since I was planning on drinking, I didn't drive, and my friend picked me up. We went to the pub, and it was a blast. More friends showed up, and we had a great time chatting, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. It was a nice break from the usual routine, and I was getting really glad that I went out. As the drinks kept flowing, we got a bit more adventurous and decided to play spin the bottle. Normally, I wouldn't have gone for it, but my friends convinced me, saying I'd be a killjoy if I didn't join in. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. For a few rounds, the bottle didn't land on me, but then it did, and it landed on one of my guy friends. I hesitated at first, but I didn't want to seem like I was too uptight, so I went ahead with it. I figured everyone else was married too, and they were okay with it, so why shouldn't I be? After my turn, the game started to escalate. My friends began daring each other to do more and more outrageous things, like kissing for longer or doing some pretty suggestive moves. Luckily, the bottle didn't land on me again, so I just sat back and watched the craziness unfold. The night ended with a lot of us feeling pretty wasted, and my friend had to drive me back home. When I got home, my husband seemed a bit surprised at how much I had drunk, but he didn't say much about it. Instead, he made me some tea and then tucked me into bed. The next morning, I woke up feeling a bit hungover, but my husband was there, which was a pleasant thing. He told me he didn't have to go to work that day. He then told me he would make breakfast for me, and I was honestly touched by his thoughtfulness. I stayed in bed for a few more minutes, and I couldn't shake off the events of the previous night. I felt guilty about the kiss during the spin the bottle game. I didn't want to keep secrets from my husband, but at the same time, I felt like it wasn't something I should tell him. It was just a kiss, and it didn't mean anything. Besides, I was drunk too, and it wasn't like I had planned for it to happen. I wrestled with the idea of telling my husband for a really liked, decided it would be a great idea to send the video to my husband. I had no clue about this until my husband stormed into our bedroom, video in hand, ready to confront me. I was shocked. I thought once my friend deleted the video, that would be the end of it. I felt terrible and wished I hadn't gone out that night. I tried explaining to my husband that I was drunk and it was just a silly game, but he wasn't buying it. The more I tried to explain, the more furious he became. My husband looked so furious and deeply hurt. He expressed that this incident reinforced his lack of trust in both me and my friends. He called me stupid for drinking so much and said he didn't know if he could ever forgive me. He expressed disgust at my actions, saying I should have known better. I was devastated. I felt like I had let him down and betrayed his trust. I tried to explain that I was sorry and that it was a mistake, but he wouldn't listen. He was so angry, and his words cut really deep. I couldn't stop crying. I felt so overwhelmed with regret and shame. I honestly couldn't help but feel a surge of anger towards my husband's best friend for sending the video and the friend who had recorded it. They had betrayed my trust and had caused so much pain and damage to my marriage. The whole situation was a literal mess, and I didn't know how we would ever recover from it. After the confrontation, my husband packed a bag and said he needed some time to think. He told me he didn't want to see me right then, and that it would be better if he left. I was at a loss for words. I didn't know how to convince him to stay, so I just nodded in resignation. He left, and I later learned that he had gone to stay at his best friend's house. He ended up staying there for a total of 3 days. During that time, I tried everything I could think of to coax him back home. I sent him numerous messages, but he remained distant. I couldn't bring myself to involve his family in our issues. They were staunchly against divorce, and I knew they would have strong opinions if they found out about the kiss. However, I confided in my elder brother, who I'm extremely close to, and he helped by texting my husband, urging him to come home. After 3 days, Eric finally came back home. He seemed calmer, but there was still a noticeable tension between us. It was clear that the incident had deeply affected our relationship, and it would take time to rebuild the trust that had been broken, but I honestly thought we would weather through it. I noticed that my husband had become really distant. He started sleeping in the guest room, and no matter how hard I tried, he refused to come back into our bedroom. It was like a physical barrier had formed between us, and no amount of pleading or reasoning could bridge the gap. Not only did he physically distance himself, but he also emotionally withdrew. He stopped doing all the little things he used to do before. He no longer offered me massages after a long day. He stopped cooking for me, and he seemed to bury himself in work, taking on even more hours than before. It was heartbreaking to see the man I loved and shared my life with pulling away from me. I felt lost and alone, unsure of how to reach him or how to mend our fractured relationship. His distance only served to deepen the sense of guilt and regret I felt over the events that had led us to this point. I tried so hard to reach out to my husband, to bridge the growing gap between us, but it felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. It was in this moment that I realized just how much my husband had been the one trying in our relationship. He had been the one reaching out to me, doing everything he could to keep our connection strong. I had taken his efforts for granted, never fully appreciating all that he did for me. Now that he had stopped doing the housework and other things he used to do, I realized just how much he had been carrying on his shoulders. It was like he had been the bridge in our relationship, and now that he had refused to play that role anymore, there was a massive, unbridgeable gap between us. I tried to step up and take on more responsibilities around the house, but it was a daunting task. Our house was huge, and the chores seemed never-ending. I tried sleeping in the guest room with him, hoping to show him that I was there for him, but he refused, telling me to go back to my own room. He told me he still wasn't over what I had done and that he needed time and space. But how long would he need? And how could I make things right again? I am consumed with guilt and sorrow, and I am desperate to make amends. I started packing lunches for him and doing other things I had never done before, hoping to show him how sorry I was. But nothing seems to work. And that's why I'm here, Reddit. I've heard this app can be incredibly helpful, and I'm wondering if there's anything I can do to bridge the gap between me and my husband. I'm terrified that things will remain this way forever, and I don't want that. My husband is no longer the thoughtful, loving, quiet man he used to be. He's become cold and distant, and it feels like I'm living with a stranger. It's like he's no longer my husband, but just a roommate I've become acquainted with. It's heartbreaking, and I don't know what to do. I'm scared that if things don't change, we'll just keep growing apart until there's nothing left of our relationship. I want to fix things, to get back to how we used to be, but I don't know where to start. How can I make him see that I'm sorry and that I want to make things right? Any advice would be really appreciated. Update. Hello Reddit, it's been a while. Many of you may remember me as the woman who came here seeking advice because my marriage was falling apart after I kissed someone else while drunk. I honestly didn't think I would be back to update this post, as I posted here in a moment of desperation, seeking guidance. I didn't know what else to do, so I turned to this community. It's been 2 months since I first posted, and I've received numerous messages asking for an update, so here it is. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who offered advice and support. Your words meant a lot to me during a difficult time. Many of you suggested that I talk to my husband, believing that communication would help us work through our issues. So here's the update. For the next few weeks, things remained unchanged. My husband continued to be distant and unresponsive, as if he had erased me from his life. It was heartbreaking to see him change so drastically. I knew something had to be done, so I decided to have a serious conversation with him. I told him that we couldn't go on like this and that I wanted us to work things out. He admitted that he had been struggling with his feelings and wasn't sure if he could ever forgive me. Hearing those words shattered me. I loved him deeply, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. I suggested couples counseling as a last effort to save our marriage. My husband was hesitant at first, as he wasn't keen on therapy, but he agreed to give it a try. However, he also expressed that he felt it might be better for us to divorce. I was devastated by his words, but I couldn't ignore his feelings. I love him too much to force him to stay if he feels it's best to part ways. So I agreed to the divorce on the condition that we first try counseling. He agreed, and we began the process of seeking professional help. However, during this time, he told me that watching the video of me kissing someone else had changed everything for him. It was as if all the love and attraction he had felt for me had disappeared in an instant. He apologized for any pain he had caused me, but he also made it clear that he couldn't forgive me. As much as it hurts, I have to accept his decision. Attending couples counseling was a profound experience for both of us. It opened our eyes to many issues that had been simmering beneath the surface. During our sessions, my husband shared that he had always felt insecure about my social life and the friends I kept. This revelation cut deep because he had never expressed these feelings to me before. If he had, I would have made a concerted effort to address his concerns. However, it seemed that his silence had created a divide that was now difficult to bridge. He also reiterated the impact of watching the video of me kissing someone else. He explained that seeing that moment shattered his image of me and caused him immense pain. He said it was as if a part of his heart had been broken irreparably. Furthermore, my husband expressed feeling like he had always been the one putting in the effort in our relationship. He felt that he was constantly the initiator, the planner, the one driving the relationship forward. He mentioned that he often felt unappreciated and that his love for me was not reciprocated in the same way. Hearing these words was incredibly painful because deep down, I knew they were true. I had taken my husband's efforts for granted, assuming that he enjoyed taking the lead in our relationship. I now realized that my lack of effort and initiative had contributed to the strain between us. I loved my husband deeply, but I had failed to show it in the ways that mattered most to him. I had mistaken his actions as a preference rather than a necessity. It was a harsh reality to confront. I apologized to my husband from the depths of my heart and begged for his forgiveness. I explained to him that I had misunderstood his actions, believing that he enjoyed taking the lead in our relationship. I had assumed that he liked being the initiator and the planner, and as a result, I had not made the effort to reciprocate in the same way. After pouring my heart out and promising to change, my husband thanked me for my efforts. But he made it clear that he couldn't just forget about the kiss. He was still set on getting a divorce. I had hoped that by being sincere and showing him how much I regretted my mistake, he'd reconsider. But he was adamant. I do not know how things will play in court, but I have decided that I will do everything I can to make the divorce process as smooth as possible for him. It's a difficult and painful reality to face, but I have to respect his feelings and choices. My husband has given me a week to leave the house. That is more than enough time for me, and I'm just glad that we are going through everything as amicably as possible. In conclusion, I want to thank everyone who has supported me through this journey. Your kindness and understanding have meant the world to me. I will always cherish the good times I had with my husband and the love we shared. It's a heartbreaking end to our marriage, but I believe it's the right decision for both of us. Also, don't cheat and for your mar.